Drive, became a sustaining member, or stopped by the NEPM Asparagus Festival, thank you so much. And stay tuned for an exciting summer and fall here at NEPM.
You're watching New England Public Media, WGBY Springfield.
I'm Mona Haydar, and this is my husband, Sebastian Robbins. We're on the road for 3 weeks to follow the Muslim thread woven through the fabric of our country.
The American story is the Muslim story.
Now we are in the American West.
We're taking the Great Muslim American Road Trip.
The Great Muslim American Road Trip gets underway July 5th on NEPM. Connecting Point on NEPM is brought to you by Berkshire Museum in Pittsfield, presenting Art of the Hills, Visual Evidence, a juried art exhibition celebrating the creative culture of the region, highlighting the works of both emerging and established Berkshire-based artists. More information at berkshiremuseum.org.
Coming up, we're connecting you with the creativity and culture in your community, including a farm that embraces ecological and social justice and LGBTQ+ pride.
Not just getting excited about the rainbows, but really realizing how we are on this planet in order to make things better.
A community celebrates Juneteenth by highlighting the contributions of generations of its Black residents.
It's wonderful when, we have historians or they're told through archives, but there's nothing like descendants telling their stories.
And addressing issues of housing insecurity through art.
It's really been incredibly inspiring to feel like we can actually work with people and change something, or hopefully we will.
Join us for those stories and more as we explore the creativity, culture, and community that make us Western New England. Up next on Connecting Point.
Support for Connecting Point is provided by our contributing viewers.
Welcome, and thanks for joining us for Connecting Point, your source for creativity, culture, and community. I'm Saidalis Bauer. Each week this summer, we're exploring all that Western New England has to offer, and today we're coming to you from historic Adams, Massachusetts in the northern Berkshires. This former cotton mill town boasts a picturesque downtown where a visit by President William McKinley in 1897 to lay the cornerstone of the library is marked by a statue in his honor. But today, the town that sits at the base of the state's highest peak, Mount Greylock, is perhaps best known for its outdoor recreation and as the birthplace of legendary suffragist Susan B. Anthony. Adams and the northern Berkshires also have an artistic side, which we'll explore a little later in the program. But our show today begins in Hampshire County. Two Mama's Farm is nestled in the town of Cummington, where owners Sarah and Lee describe their farm as queer in many ways. Queer not only in the nature of LGBTQIA, but also in the challenging and unique things they produce, and the rainbow-encompassing perspective they bring to their products and community. Producer Dave Frazier brings us their story.
I've always been attracted to farming. I grew up in Northampton, though I was born here in Cummington, and I always wanted to be a farmer. I love animals, I love tending life, and I was really into permaculture and just growing local food and trying to reinvent economies, and so here we are.
Farming sort of spoke to me in some way. I sort of came alongside it in this, way that people do, where you meet somebody who has a farm and start coming by. And my interest in farming and dairying. And at that time I was in undergraduate school and was writing poetry, and there was something really beautiful about the rhythm of dairying. And I met Sarah at an organic farming conference about dairying. And so we connected.
We're Two Mama's Farm. We're located in Cummington, Massachusetts. We're halfway between Northampton and Pittsfield. And we are a queer-run maple farm.
Queer in identity. Sarah and I both identify as queer. And we also queer things as sort of a verb. So, I think the way that we approach the world, the way we approach farming and parenting is queer. It's different than other people may do things.
I've always joked to Lee that, in the first 5 things about me, I used to never say that I'm gay. Like, that just never it wasn't the most important thing. And, in the last, really since, Trump and whatever's going on in the country, suddenly, like, my privilege at growing up in Northampton and, like, being gay is really coming back up there because we're in a place that we can be.
I love Pride. I think that it's a lovely and necessary sort of tribute to our community. I think that there's a lot of joy and celebration, which we don't get a lot of. It's also important for me to remember, and I think this is part of how I celebrate Pride, is in remembering and honoring its roots as a riot, as a rebellion, as an act of sort of fighting back against oppression. And part of the way that I think that I like to celebrate and honor Pride is in making sure that we're sort of still rooted in that and not just getting excited about the rainbows, but really realizing like how we are on this planet in order to make things better. Maple sugaring is our prime enterprise at this juncture. I like maple syrup. It's one of the few sweeteners that I can eat with my illnesses. So it's exciting to have such high quality, pure, organic maple syrup, and I know exactly where it comes from.
So the tap goes in the tree, there it goes, your sap comes down into your lateral line. I love the symbiotic nature of maple farming and that, we get to harvest sap from the trees as they grow and we kind of tend the forest and, help the maple babies grow and keep diversity going. And I'm hoping this can be a regenerative livelihood. And farming is endlessly creative. I feel like when people think of farmers, they think of like Iowa corn farmers and that it's just this very mechanized thing. And, I love it. I love the artistry of maple. I love that every single batch you make tastes a little bit different. I love the creativity and the engineering that goes into designing the sapline systems. It's great. And the skills my kids can get from it, it's just exciting that they're going to get to grow up with that.
If you enjoyed that story, be sure to go online to nepm.org/connectingpoint as we celebrate Pride with a look at the people, stories, and issues that shape the LGBTQ+ experience in Western New England. And Two Mamas Farm also boasts a mile round-trip hike to a waterfall on the south end of the property. In a digital extra, farmer Sarah Fournier-Scanlon talks about the hiking trails that are open to the public.
Our land is all in conservation. We did that back in 2010. And it's like a 1 mile round trip hike that starts in the sugar bush so you can see the trees and the waterfall is gorgeous. It's, I think, technically more of a 7-tier Cascades, but we just call it a waterfall.
You can find that digital extra and so much more right now on our webpage at nepm.org/connectingpoint. This Juneteenth, the local nonprofit organization Ancestral Bridges teamed up with the Amherst Historical Society and Museum to present the Juneteenth Heritage Walking Tour. This 1.5-mile tour explores the history and contributions made by generations of Black families in Amherst through storytelling, artwork, and special exhibits. The tour was curated by the descendants of these families, and I spoke with organizers to learn more.
West Cemetery is the resting place of the Thompson brothers. The Thompson brothers were actually, they all served in either the Massachusetts Volunteer 54th Infantry Regiment or the 5th Cavalry. My 4x great-grandfather, Christopher Thompson, was in the 5th Cavalry, and he traveled with those brave soldiers who actually went to Texas to deliver that news of freedom. It serves as a marker of history and people who helped build this town in many ways.
You mentioned being a descendant of these generations of Black families in Amherst yourself, and I know that this tour is unique in being that it is descendant-led and curated by descendants. Why was that important, and what added value does that bring to this tour, having that perspective?
Well, one, I'm told it was the first of its kind in this area. And I think it is incredibly important for descendants to tell their stories. It's wonderful when, we have historians or they're told through archives, but there's nothing like descendants telling their stories. This was also inspired by the acts of my grandfather, Dudley Bridges Sr., who grew up in Springfield by way of Georgia, and he had initiated acts to highlight and find home for these Civil War tablets that were gifted to the town of Amherst in 1893. And what's unique about them is they include the names of Black soldiers, which wasn't commonplace at that time. So, we were inspired to really carry on his efforts as we did last year with the Juneteenth celebration, and then, carry on this year to go through the town.
So let's talk about some of these historic spots, because this 1.5 mile walking tour stops at some of these key spots in Amherst, such as the Emily Dickinson Museum and Hope Church. And it also features art exhibits and other special exhibits as well. So what went into choosing the locations, and how do they immerse visitors in that day-to-day life experience that generations of Black families went through and are still going through?
They're all pointed, they're all epic and lesser known Black historical landmarks. So Emily Dickinson was carefully chosen. Charles Thompson was actually a fiddler for the Dickinsons. And there's also that leads that history of some of those descendants being with Amherst College. I had personally been inspired by that by seeing the new Dickinson series during the pandemic shutdown and looking at in some of though they're fictional scenes where Emily is partying with Black people in a barn and knowing like who they would be, who they would have been. And, these are all spaces that, this was really a first for it in many ways. The Amherst History Museum, this was the first time that Black and Afro-Indigenous families have been on the walls in that space. So it was incredibly important for Ancestral Bridges to have an exhibit that was fully curated by descendants in that space. The Hope Church and the Goodwin Church, these churches were established by these families. So it was wonderful to have them there and call attention to them. They're, the first and oldest standing Black churches here in Amherst, and they really should be celebrated as such.
I'm always fascinated by history and learning about where we're from and everything. So as a 7th generation descendant like yourself, what do you hope people take away from this tour?
We have a lot of work to do. Our exhibit at the History Museum, we ended very purposefully with a campaign through an artist and physician, Dr. Shirley Jackson Whitaker. And this campaign is really her brainchild, and it is called Tote to Vote, totetovote.com, and that deals with voter suppression. We wanted to make sure this is, where do we go from here? We're celebrating the past really to focus on its relevance to the future, and the courageous acts of those who stepped forward when they didn't have the choices that we do now. There was no one interviewing them to get their message across. For us all to really, take part and honor that and make sure that we're doing that, not only to connect and empower the youth, and especially our youth of color to, for them to celebrate that, they come from heroes, and really be inspired by that, but of us all to think about what can we do to carry this forward so we're not celebrating this history on a month or a day out of the year.
Art and social responsibility are no strangers to one another, as a recent show at Real Eyes Gallery in Adams demonstrates. 4 artists working under the banner of North Adams Contemporary wanted to do something for their community, and so their show, entitled A Sense of Place, aims to raise awareness of housing insecurity, with some of the profits benefiting Lewison House, an organization that tackles issues of homelessness in the northern Berkshires. Connecting Point's Brian Sullivan brings us the story.
It's early Saturday evening in the northern Berkshire town of Adams. The date is June 4th, 2022, and it's the opening night of the Benefit Art Exhibition for the Lewison House Transitional Housing Program in North Adams. The event was the brainchild of 4 local artists known as the North Adams Contemporary, and the idea seemed to go from concept to reality within the blink of an eye.
Sarah Sutro, I've known as an artist locally for a long time. She emailed me at one point saying, just talking about their artist collaborative, and that they were thinking of doing fundraisers for different nonprofits. Would we be interested? And I said, sure, we'd like that. That would really be great. And later on, I heard back from her saying, we're going to do it, and we're going to do Lewison House, and we're going to do, the whole project. I don't even know if she had the name at the time.
The name of the exhibit is A Sense of Place, and while each artist involved offers up her own unique style and medium, their collective aim is to raise awareness of the growing homelessness and housing insecurity issues that lurk beneath the Norman Rockwell veneer of places like Adams and North Adams.
These last couple of years have been very difficult for everyone. So in sitting around, we said, well, we're artists. We're not politicians. We're not activists. We're not economists. What can we actually do? What can we do without leaving our careers? And so we decided that we would sell our art and give donations, half, 50% of whatever we sell, to a cause. Why not right here? North Adams, and so Lewison House.
I've known about Lewison House for a long time, and when we thought of doing a benefit show, we thought about some larger organizations, in other parts of the Berkshires, but it seemed more connected to us to focus on right where we lived.
All four women are accomplished artists, and we were fortunate enough to get a fly-on-the-wall view from each of their studios. Debbie Pendel's offerings are a cross between representational and abstract art, where she puts combinations of symbol systems in landscape space to see what people read from it. Sarah Sutro started her career as a realist figurative painter and has moved on to painting watercolor landscapes or using inks for abstract like she was when we dropped in. Outside of Betty Vera's studio, several of her works can be seen, and at first glance, they give off the illusion of being paintings. But from inside the studio, we see the industrial setup needed for her to create that illusion.
I have always loved painting and was always a painter. And then that changed for me when I got my hand on threads as a way of painting. And so that's probably why my work is unique compared to the others I'm exhibiting with. And we each have a little different background, different training, different interests in mediums to use. But we all appreciate and like each other's work.
Diane Reed Sawyer is able to use the view outside her window as her muse, as she worked with pastels during our visit.
I've always loved painting what I see outside. There's something about the light, the way it changes during the day, the way that things just are illuminated at dusk and at dawn. And it's something that I've really treasured, is being able to just sit there and absorb what I'm seeing. It's sort of like a, sort of like a meditation without meditating.
Whatever methods and mediums, each artist had several works on display for the benefit, some recent and others dating back more than a decade or two. The hope now is to sell some art, raise some money for the Lewison House, and raise awareness of the growing housing insecurity in the region.
I'm just hoping that this really just helps more public awareness of the issues for people. Not just Lewison House, but a lot of us who are dealing with housing and homeless issues.
It's really actually been incredibly inspiring to feel like we can actually work with people and change something, or hopefully we will.
Every week, Connecting Point explores the creativity, culture, and community that make us Western New England. But it doesn't stop there. You can find us online anytime for exclusive features and content. In this week's digital exclusive, each of the 4 members of North Adams Contemporary discusses their experience as an artist living in the Eclipse Mill in the northern Berkshires, after spending most of their careers in big cities.
This is kind of like being in the city in the country, because the building is like this old factory building, but like a few steps away is just like acres and acres of wildness. So it satisfies a number of things to be here.
You can find that digital exclusive online right now at nepm.org/connectingpoint. Local poet and author Joy Ladin has released her 10th book of poetry entitled Shekhinah Speaks. In Jewish tradition, the Shekhinah is imagined as a passive, silent presence which represents the feminine side of God. However, in this collection, Ladin samples language from the book of Isaiah and Cosmopolitan magazine to envision a Shekhinah who never stops talking and allows readers to become aware of their existence in this world. I spoke with Ladin to learn more.
I think it started around my PhD dissertation. I was trying to figure out modernist American poetics. And if you've ever read T.S. Eliot, for example, or Ezra Pound, I don't know about you, but I think I understand, and then suddenly I'm lost. And so, and I had the same response to Emily Dickinson, and I thought, instead of trying to write a PhD dissertation about what I understand, why don't I write about why I can't understand these poems that I've read over and over again? But in a lot of those poems, there's a sense that they're combining words that are drawn from radically different parts of human experience. Like Emily Dickinson has this beautiful phrase, amethyst remembrance. Now, what is an amethyst remembrance? One is from mineralogy, that word, and another is from human psychology, and she jams them together into something that sounds like it means a lot, but you can't actually figure out what it means because the language bits come from different places. So I figured out how to describe those kinds of effects, and I thought, well, this is interesting to me. I want to learn to do this sort of diction mixing. So I had worked with women's magazine language before. Cosmo had always scared me, I think, because of the covers, you know, like, yeah.
Intense, yeah.
Yeah, they're intense. Nothing says give up on gender transition like looking at those covers. You will never get there, Joy.
Yeah, good point, right? Yeah.
But now there's a website and a database, and I could just search for stuff. So I thought, well, what would happen if I tried to take a part of God speaking in Isaiah and see if there's a Cosmo article that sort of relates to it. So there's an Isaiah passage that starts out, "Sing out, O barren one who has not given birth," which I really related to as somebody who's not able to give birth. But and so I put barren into the Cosmo website, and immediately the first thing that came up was why this woman is proud to be known as the pageant queen without a uterus. And the Shekhinah, of course, she's called queen. She does not have a uterus. She is proud. Anyway, it just seemed like if the Cosmo website can be seen as a form of divine communication, I had just gotten the thumbs up from God on this project. So I took it from there, and I started taking words out of each text and literally just making lists of them and mushing them together until they started to cohere to each other into phrases and sentences started to sound like they were saying something. And it wasn't me saying it was more me trying to hear what voice was coming through the sentences.
I have to say, when I first read that you used Book of Isaiah and Cosmopolitan, it didn't make any sense to me. But the way you just explained it right now, it almost makes perfect sense. And so thank you for that explanation. And I know that the book is also described allowing readers to be conscious of their space and their connection in this world. In what ways will we experience this journey of awareness through this poetry book?
One of the things that was surprising to me about the way the Shekhinah talked, like when I asked myself, how does the Shekhinah speak? The only thing I got was any way she wants to, right? You don't tell divinity how to talk.
Right.
Right? Yes.
How dare you?
Not a good idea. But both in Isaiah and in Cosmopolitan, the way that these voices speak to us is in the second person. They're all addressing a you. And both God in Isaiah and the you that you hear in women's magazines is a you that seems to know everything about you. It believes, in fact, it knows you better than you do. Have you ever noticed that? It's like this stranger knows what makeup you should wear and what mistakes you've made when you've tried to wear it. Like it's a kind of omniscience that's but it's not transcendent omniscience. It's like, wow, you are in my stuff and watching the mistakes that I make as I try to put on mascara. That is weird. And in Isaiah, it's a lot about, you people, I know you're heartbroken. I know you're worried about this. So it's the same kind of very intimate but totally authoritative naming of the you. So those two things went together very beautifully. And at a certain point, I had thought that the book would really be about the Shekhinah trying to explain who she was. Because, from my perspective, I didn't know, and I know that people generally don't know. But I was very surprised that the Shekhinah is actually mostly trying to tell us who we are. And she's trying to do that partly because she wants to prove that she's really here with us, that she knows us, each of us inside out. So she wants to say, I know you're feeling this way, and I know you've gone through this. And she's also doing that, though, because she wants us to realize not just that she's there, but how we are connected.
And for more from poet Joy Ladin, head over to Connecting Point Online for a digital extra as she takes us on a journey of existence and awareness through her poem entitled Your Body, which is featured in her latest poetry collection entitled Shekhinah Speaks.
You keep trying to escape the body I love, the blazing crush of physicality, impurity, and shame, separating you from yourself, from your soul, from me. The body I formed in your mother's womb, delivered, dandled, nursed, and comforted.
You can find that digital extra on our webpage right now. And that does it for this edition of Connecting Point. Remember, you can always find all of the stories that you saw in this episode, as well as exclusive features, digital-only content, and so much more online anytime at nepm.org/connectingpoint. Our thanks to the town of Adams for hosting us today. And please be sure to join us again every week right here for more stories of the creativity, culture, and community that make us Western New England. I'm Saidalis Bauer. Thanks for watching and take care.
Support for Connecting Point is provided by our contributing viewers. Connecting Point on NEPM is brought to you by Berkshire Museum in Pittsfield, presenting Art of the Hills, Visual Evidence, a juried art exhibition celebrating the creative culture of the region, highlighting the works of both emerging and established Berkshire-based artists. More information at berkshiremuseum.org.
I started having sad thoughts around the end of 3rd grade.
It feels like you want to cry, but there's nothing there.
You're never alone, and you're gonna get through this.
Hiding in Plain Sight, Monday and Tuesday nights at 9 on NEPM.
These home cooks are being put to the test.
This is everything that I dreamed of.
But are they up to the challenge?
I go from flustered to panic.
We want to fall in love with your recipes.
It's go time.
Follow 10 cooks from across the country as they prepare their unique family dishes, judged by celebrity chefs.
That is a perfect recipe.
And compete to see who has the great American recipe.
Ready to cook your hearts out?
The Great American Recipe premieres Friday at 9 on NEPM.
On Masterpiece Mystery.
Oh, back on the horse then?
Looks to have been a time bomb. Simple but effective.
2 shootings in 2 days by 2 different killers. That hardly seems likely, does it?
So what's the plan?
Give him a line, I suppose.
Nothing's going to happen to him with you here.
Get him out of there.
We're who we are, Morse. Our nature. We can try to escape it, but it will find us out in the end.
A new season of Endeavour on Masterpiece Mystery. Stream now with Passport on the PBS video app.
You're back. It's good to have you home, James.
The best practice in Glasgow. They've offered me a job. With to work out if there's something here worth staying for.
Oh, someone?
Helen,
I'd like to have danced with you again.
if your toes could take it. Why don't you try standing up to him? Have you met my brother? You know, I'm always open to new ideas. I need to talk to you about Glasgow.
You belong here. This is your home.
A marathon of All Creatures Great and Small Season 2, Saturday at 10:30.
What we're going to do is we're going to kind of act out some of those roles. I have used PBS Learning Media as a resource for myself as a teacher. I teach video production, so I can simply show a short video, and get the same message out that I want to teach my students. So Joe, you are a camera person? We've actually looked at a few videos where we're looking at the different roles of production. Everyone has to fill a particular role, the actors, the camera person, the lighting. So those kind of videos help get the kids more knowledgeable of what they're supposed to be doing in our class.
You're watching New England Public Media, WGBY Springfield.
Watch The Green Planet July 6th or stream at any PM.